The other day, it seems we're reporting on another Minnesota outrage. And to think we could have had their buffoon of a governor, Tim Walz, as vice president. Here with more details, senior national correspondent Kevin Corrick. Kev.
Listen, Laura, it just gets worse and worse. You've already heard this story sort of play out over the last several days. Somalia-based terror group Al-Shabaab. Of course, it's also been linked to the radical Islamic terror group Al-Qaeda. It's considered a major threat to the U.S. and our interests. Well, apparently it's been the beneficiary of money stolen in a spate of scams in Minnesota by criminals in the Somali community there. Now, that's according to a report in the City Journal, and it's citing federal counterterrorism sources. Now, the Journal says millions of dollars in taxpayer money were stolen as part of a series of massive Minnesota welfare fraud schemes. And what's more, this is part of a disturbing pattern. You may remember in recent months we heard about the U.S. Attorney of Minnesota uncovering multi-million-dollar fraud schemes targeting the state's Medicaid housing stabilization program and a federally funded autism program for kids. Now, the state's top prosecutor believes billions, with a B, in taxpayer money has been stolen as a result of the fraud, and it makes its way to Al-Shabaab through untold millions of dollars in cash that's remitted back to Somalia from Minnesota, and then through a network of handlers known as halwalas. These are the guys that sort of clean or launder the money, and sadly, Minnesota has been plagued by several high-profile fraud scandals in recent years. You might remember the biggest was that Feeding Our Future scam. That's the one where they've already racked up 56 criminal convictions. It was a program meant to feed kids during the pandemic. Prosecutors allege they stole some $300 million from that federally funded program. We're talking about ground zero for immigration fraud, theft. It's Minnesota. People have to take a very close look at that, Laura.
Unreal. Kevin, thank you so much. And these financial scams, political corruption, unfortunately, they're par for the course in Minneapolis. So back in 2018, local mini station Fox 9 investigated a similar scheme where as much as $100 million in cash was being stuffed into suitcases and flown out of town. So the fraudsters were reportedly using daycare facilities, isn't that nice, owned mostly by Somalis, to game the system and steal millions in government subsidies. Remember, it's always for the children. Here with us is one of the men who helped explain.
Want to really see something that said, take a look at what happened.
Hey. Why this beat so cold?
We will make America proud again. And you try to kill our we will make America wealthy again. And yes, together, we will make America great again.
Get them all out. Jail time and deportations. Walk that bastard as governor out, that Tim Walz fellow. We were this close, man. He was actually on the ballot. And that heifer say, oh, well, I didn't choose him because he was gay. Oh, I can't get Oprah Winfrey back on the phone to get my money back. Oh, maybe we should have gave Beyonce a little more money. We might have turned Texas purple. I tell you, the Democrats they ought to be ashamed of themselves, man. It just gets worse and worse and worse. Some of the biggest scandals, the biggest corruption, but everybody want to come out and scream to the top of their lungs about the big bad orange man. Our democracy. I tell you, man, it is a disgrace. Everything that has taken place, everything we've covered, I mean, man. And we've covered this so many times, you know, and now look what's coming out in broad daylight. You just can't make this up, man. You just can't. It ought to be jail time or deportations, walked at hellfire in Congress, and not just her, a lot of people ought to be walked out. We ought to have term limits, walk Tim Walz out, walk that other big joker out, walk that other incompetent heifer out. People ought to be walked out, in my opinion, with their hands behind their back.
Federal prosecutors say Minnesota is grappling with one of the biggest welfare fraud waves in U.S. history. And now counterterrorism officials warn some of that money very likely ended up in the pockets of Al-Shabaab.
And spit on the people, man. To spit on the taxpayers. The hell with the taxpayers, huh? The hell with my people. Y'all my people. We each other's people. We the people, baby. You know? They got all these other protests going on, no kings and all this other bull crap. I tell you what, we ought to protest. And if I really want to say what I really want to say, they might take the video down. Hell.
An Al-Qaeda-linked terror group operating out of Somalia. National correspondent Kayla Gaskins has the details from Washington.
Is the biggest funder of Al-Shabaab, the Al-Qaeda-linked terror group in Somalia, actually the Minnesota taxpayer? A federal investigator says yes. An alarming claim first reported by City Journal, which spoke with multiple former federal agents. The U.S. Attorney's Office has charged dozens of defendants across multiple schemes, including housing aid fraud, pandemic child nutrition
fraud,
and false billing for autism therapy. In total, prosecutors say these schemes have cost Minnesota taxpayers billions of dollars.
Still, there are people that have legitimately could use those resources that are not getting those resources. It's past criminal.
Minnesota is home to one of the country's largest Somali communities. Former state fraud investigator Cashapp, himself a Somali American, wrote last year that it's uncomfortable and true that nearly all defendants in these major fraud cases come from that community.
They have taken advantage of the most generous country in the world and one of the most generous states in that country.
And according to City Journal, some of the stolen money was sent overseas through informal cash transfer networks. Investigators say once that cash arrived in Somalia, Al-Shabaab took a cut, whether the sender intended that or not.
Pretty much across the board, people that I spoke to said there really isn't a law enforcement solution to this problem. As you said, that's simply playing whack-a-mole. People pretty consistently told me that, there needs to be a policy change here.
Critics claim Minnesota leaders have tiptoed around the issue, fearing a backlash from the state's powerful Somali American voting bloc.
New details on a jury tampering scheme at the center of a major fraud case. Federal prosecutors indicted 5 people for their roles in offering a juror $120,000 for a not guilty verdict in the Feeding Our Future fraud scheme. The U.S. attorney says the group targeted juror 52 because she was the youngest juror and appeared to be the only juror of color. According to court documents, they dug up information on her family online and even put a GPS tracking device on her car to track her whereabouts. During their investigation, investigators uncovered a video of one of the defendants leaving a bag of money at the juror's home. You may recall the juror came forward with the bribe, and 5 of the 7 defendants were found guilty of fraud. They were convicted for stealing millions of dollars from the government meant to feed hungry kids during the pandemic.
Secretary Kristi Noem is coming to Minneapolis tomorrow. This happening on the heels of President Trump announcing he will end temporary protected status for Somalis in Minnesota. Under this initiative, immigrants who can't return to their home country safely due to war or natural disasters are allowed to stay in the U.S. Fox 9's Leon Purvis joins us now from the newsroom tonight. Leon, break it all down for us. What does all of this mean?
Karen, President Trump's Truth Social post doesn't do anything legally when talking about temporary protected status. In order for it to end, it would have to come from the Secretary of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem. Friday night, President Donald Trump posted on Truth Social, "I am, as President of the United States, hereby terminating, effective immediately, the temporary protected status for Somalis in Minnesota." It caused some people to think Trump is trying to score political points with his base.
I think this is a political act. We believe it is fabricated and created for the single purpose to rein in the young conservatives in this country.
So we asked a lawyer, does a Truth Social post or an executive order mean an end to temporary protected status for Somalis?
It's the Secretary of Homeland Security determining there's a reason for temporary protected status from that country.
According to Michelle Garnett-McKenzie, there are 700 people in the country who have protected status from Somalia. About 500 of those are living in Minnesota. In Trump's post, he said he is terminating protective status effective immediately. However, when temporary status is revoked, according to Michelle, federal law states it can't take effect earlier than 60 days after the publication of that notice, and it has to come from the Secretary of Homeland Security. In order to get protective status, it's a process.
Each applicant has to file paperwork, pay a filing fee, pass a background check, and have their application adjudicated every 12 or 18 months to remain in temporary protected status.
Now, if someone is no longer eligible for protected status, it's denied, and the deportation proceedings begin. In Trump's Truth Social post, he specifically says he is ending temporary protected status for Somalis in Minnesota. If the program ended, it would be for the whole country. And again, we're expecting the Secretary of Homeland Security here in the Twin Cities.
A $250 million fraud scheme. Already 77 people, many of them Somali immigrants, have been charged in one of the largest taxpayer-funded scams in U.S. history. Minnesota, home to the largest Somali community in America, has become the center of this massive investigation. This is the Feeding Our Future scandal, a pandemic-era scheme in which defendants allegedly stole over $250 million meant to provide meals for low-income children. Instead of feeding kids, prosecutors say the money went toward luxury homes, high-end cars, jewelry, overseas transfers, and an entire network of shell companies. According to the DOJ, the conspirators submitted fake invoices, fabricated meal counts, and even staged photos to make it look like they were serving millions of meals that never existed. In some cases, they claimed to feed more children than lived in entire neighborhoods. A federal jury found Amy Bach, the founder of Feeding Our Future, and Salim Ahmed Saeed guilty of conspiracy, bribery, wire fraud, money laundering. Federal officials say more arrests may still be coming.
I think the worst of the state government fraud cases have been uncovered, or do you have reason to believe there is more to come?
Oh, I think there's more. And look, we've got organized crime ring in Minnesota. I think it's been going on for years.
From Feeding Our Future to autism programs to housing stabilization, Minnesota taxpayers are victims of more than $1 billion of fraud. Do you think there was not enough skepticism for too long in state agencies that were overseeing these programs?
I think it's an unfortunate situation, but yeah, I think you need to be more skeptical now in this world. I think the COVID pandemic and the releasing of some of the rules, the relaxing of the rules, fostered this.
On Feeding Our Future, some of it in retrospect seems so obvious. Thousands of children supposedly being fed at these sites that were, it just physically wasn't even possible. Was that a big miss by members of your administration who were supposed to be overseeing that?
I think in retrospect now, if you have the resources, and I think we do have more of those now, yes, it makes sense to just go out there and see if someone's doing this. Go out there and knock on the door, see if they're doing